Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I want to get a little excitement going for what I felt was a big surprise announcement from the Game Awards this last week. Now, everyone's focused on the really heavy hitters depending on what you're into. You know, for me, you got 7 Rebirth, 16 DLC, Monster Hunter Wilds, we won't see it for who knows how long, 2025 at some point, but that was really exciting. And one that you might be surprised I'm super into is Blade. It's one of my favorite comics, so I'm really glad to see it, and I've been desperately waiting for the Blade movie as well. But I'm getting off topic. The one thing that just kind of stuck with me the very next day when I woke up and was thinking about all the announcements was Visions of Mana, or Mana, whichever you prefer. Now, there were sort of whispers of a new game in the franchise back in like 2021. They announced the Legend of Mana remake at the 30th anniversary, and they just kind of made like passing comments for like the future of the franchise. Nothing set in stone, no big promise of a new title, just this kind of little comment that we all just, read between the lines on. But now we have this official unveiling of the brand new game, and I gotta say, it looks really good. I was just surprised that of all the announcements I was thinking about the next day, it was this one. It just kind of, I don't know, maybe it just hit different. I mean, the Mana series is basically like a child of the Final Fantasy series. Back on the Game Boy, the first ever Mana game wasn't called the Mana game. It was called Seiken Densetsu, or Final Fantasy Adventure. Square's just trying to sell copies. Like, oh, just throw Final Fantasy on the title. That'll make people buy it. Anyway, it ditched the Final Fantasy name a game later with Secret of Mana, but that odd sort of camaraderie, I don't know, for me it never really dissipated. So I suppose in some ways, between the expected Final Fantasy 7 and 16 trailers, it was like we got another Final Fantasy trailer just disguised as a completely different franchise. Now, I'm not saying that Mana is just Final Fantasy under a different skin. No, it's very much got its own identity, and it has carved that out over the last 30 years. So don't want it to seem that way. I guess that's just kind of the feeling I get inside me, trying to figure out why I'm so attached to this idea and why this one was so fascinating to me. Speaking of which, this series has had, well, an interesting history. It's just had a lot of ups and downs with its different titles, and it's really cool to see the first new mainline game in like 15 years. I mean, the original Secret of Mana is considered a staple RPG classic amongst many, but then they remade it, and that was very underwhelming. I didn't even finish it. Meanwhile, Trials of Mana, it never really got the same notoriety as Secret. It wasn't really disliked, but it just wasn't like the highlighted game amongst the classic era of them. Meanwhile, the remake of Trial of Mana is one of the only games I've ever seen Square say that it like drastically oversold from their expectations. When was the last time Square ever said that? At best, we got a met expectations with 16, and maybe they've said that about something else. But they said it was like way over what they expected it to do. I mean, Trials of Mana remake might just be the reason they said, you know what? Let's make a brand new game in the title. Let's make a AAA Mana game. Let me be clear, they haven't called it AAA. I mean, I'm just looking at the trailer, and comparatively to the previous games, at least it looks AAA. And the trailer sports a beautiful series of environments and a brief look into its combat and story. Now, keep in mind, story in Mana games is like ultra traditional fantasy. There's a tree of mana, there's a sword of light, and you got to save the world. They all have their little intricacies and usually some pretty interesting characters. Kevin in Trials of Mana is a definite standout for me. But there's almost always these exact same elements, and it's similar to how Final Fantasy does it. It's just that Mana has stuck with it for what feels like they've stuck like closer to the roots more than anything else, and they say they're going to be doing the same here. I mean, the exact description of Vision states, Visions of Mana will return to the series' action RPG roots and take players on a new adventure with protagonist Val, a soul guard assigned to protect his childhood friend who has been chosen by the fairy as the Alm of Fire to travel to the Tree of Mana and rejuvenate the mana flow. That sounds about as classic Mana as you can get. And as for the gameplay, it presents a somewhat more, I'll call it vertical and responsive take on traditional Mana gameplay. Being an action RPG, people always kind of have their own idea of what that will be, and I'd say the series has never really been a super snappy action RPG game. It's often required players to commit to combat decisions with weightier moves or cast times. Now, that's not to say it's the same for every type of character, but that's a decent generalization. This looks to have that intact still. You can see from the animations on Val's swings and the tornado spell that it's not like he's zipping around for the first several bits of gameplay that we see. But when he does get into the air, the vertical control in combat looks a little bit more fast and responsive than I would have expected from the franchise. Now, while all the environments are beautiful and the music sounds great and the gameplay and the story peaks are welcome, honestly, I'm also just excited about how smooth the trailer runs. Now, a trailer running smooth is not an indication of how it will be when I own it, just like a trailer running poorly is not an indication of how it will run when I'm actually playing it. But so many trailers, I have to question how it's actually going to perform when I get it, because there's just so many that don't release at a clean 60 FPS or even a consistent FPS. Even if it was 30 and consistent, I'd be okay with that. Whether it's a Switch title, which at this point I just never expect those to run well. There's like 1 in 20 that actually do, or some other AAA title that's just cram-packed full of particle effects that make the trailers they present us never everything it feels like they can be. This is simple, it's elegant, and it's smooth. I wonder if leaning into the art style of the Mana games is going to give them a little bit of an edge when it comes to optimization, because it isn't about ultra high graphical fidelity and tons of polygons. It's about matching a specific style. And that's something that I feel like this series, as well as Dragon Quest, can lean into a lot while still having an appealing visual. So I'm really glad to see that this trailer is just knocking it out of the park in every single way. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be on last gen as well as current gen and Steam, so I expect it probably won't run quite as well on the previous generation, but I'm hoping it just doesn't run as poorly. I'm playing it on current gen, like, don't get me wrong, but I'm just going to throw that in there. Either way, this is one I'm going to be following into 2024, and what a year of RPGs it's going to be. I mean, Dragon's Dogma 2 is looking phenomenal. 7 Rebirth, 16 DLC, 14 Dawntrail. Not to mention, there's probably so many RPGs. I mean, got to throw Like a Dragon in there as well. That's early in the year. You have Persona 3, you have Grand Blue Relink. Like, those are all like 3 days apart from each other. There's so many RPGs, and there's probably other ones I don't even know about that some of you may even know about and are excited for. I think we're going to have another crazy good RPG year in 2024 after what was a crazy good RPG year of 2023. We're eating good. RPGs, they're back on the menu, boys. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit of excitement about Visions of Mana, or again, Mana, if you prefer. Let me know what you thought in the comment section of the video below. If you're going to be giving the game a try, keeping your eyes on it for news. I know I am, and so you'll probably see a few more news videos posted about it here on the channel. Anyway, with that, I will see you in the next video, and until then, take care.